Welcome to the NASCAR DFS Strategy Show right here at Awesemo.com. I am Jason Floyd. As always, I am joined by Race Sheets Phil. Man, Phil, as always, great to be here on a Saturday afternoon talking a little NASCAR with you. Got the Cookout Southern 500 coming up tomorrow early evening, man. As always, we kind of like to start the show off by talking about, some of the various questions I kind of come up with after I look at your articles you have over there at Awesemo.com. And, you talked about this being the third race of this season at Darlington, where you said, quote, however, using those two races from mid-May may not be good for NASCAR DFS process, where you noted lap differences and also temperature differences.
Right. I mean, everything that could be different about this race versus what we had back in May, I mean, it's on the table. The number of laps are different. We had two shorter races, especially the Wednesday night race in May. That sucker ran barely over 200 laps because of rain. Tomorrow night, we're running 367 laps. So, I mean, this will be one of the longer races that we've had in quite some time. Talking about temperature changes in early to mid-May in South Carolina versus now. You had the first race, which was the return to racing, which was held in the very middle of the day, versus this race, which is going to start at dusk and finish under moonlight. So, I mean, if you're trying to take a direct apple-to-apple correlation between those two races and what we're going to see tomorrow night, it's probably not best for your process. I admitted in the article that the biggest thing that we're gauging these drivers by is their performance in those two races, which, I mean, what we have is a race that we only go to, a track that we only go to typically one time a year. So any extra data that we can get, we'll gladly take. But trying to gauge those two races as per expectations of what we're going to have tomorrow night, it may end up leading you astray.
In terms of roster construction, which is something that you also talked about in your article this week, and particularly of whether you're going to roster two Dominators, or, as you mentioned, you probably need to look at rostering three Dominators, particularly when you're talking about tournaments as opposed to a cash game.
Yeah, because we're going to the higher end of laps, we're back to 367. That just it increases the number of Dominator points, especially for DraftKings, and thus increases your need and probability of having multiple Dominators. If we go to the laps led page on the race sheets and we look at how this is broken down, in last year's Southern 500, we had 4 drivers lead 10% or more of the race, and that was the first time that we've had that. And then you go the year before that, we had just a single driver lead 10% or more of the race. But you go before that in 2017, 2016, 2015, it was always 3 drivers or 3 Dominators in those cases. So I'm saying we're looking back to those races as the more likelier outcomes for tomorrow night's race. So in cash, at the bare minimum, you're looking at a 2 Dominator build. But for tournaments, you're probably going to need 3. The wrench in this game of dodgeball is what you do with Erik Jones.
Yeah, I will tell you, I was running some crunches a little earlier. It was interesting. We'll kind of talk about, I guess we can talk about here in terms of, drivers you may prefer on one platform as opposed to another platform. And, one of those drivers that really stuck out to me just from a salary aspect was the difference between DraftKings prices on Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and how FanDuel priced him, which when I ran my crunch on it, Stenhouse came up a ton. I think it was 73% in a 150 driver lineup, as opposed to on I think DraftKings maybe came up 13-14% of the time. So kind of as you saw the line on Ricky here, particularly on, I guess, in both platforms, what was your initial take?
it's stark. You and I were chatting before we went live, and I admitted that this is probably the biggest discrepancy in salaries between DraftKings and FanDuel that I've seen outside of a plate race, or maybe the Daytona Road Course race, going back to what DraftKings did with Brendan Gaughan. At 5,500 for Ricky Stenhouse on FanDuel, you're getting him where he probably should be based on how inconsistent he's been, the equipment that he's in, his history here at Darlington, which really isn't that great. In the last 5 races here at Darlington, he's got an average finish of 27.8. So it makes no sense. Why would DraftKings give him such a high salary at 9,200? And the only answer I can come up with is they are majorly pricing in his place differential. And that's a really tough sell when you've got Erik Jones, who's just $400 more expensive and has no finish worse than 8th in all 5 of his career starts here.
Yeah, it was just, that was really the only, as I kind of looked up and down the price points, through all 4 tiers, that way we pushed it out. That was the only one that really jumped out to me. I thought pretty much for the most part, the pricing was pretty much the same on both. I mean, there was a case here or there where maybe they were a little more expensive on one as opposed to the other. But was there anybody else's salaries that stuck out to you?
The one that did stick out to me is what FanDuel is doing. And, I guess you could kind of put this one aside, is that for the last few weeks, FanDuel has refused to lower Aric Almirola's price. They are keeping him consistently at that $10,000 range, while DraftKings kind of plays with him depending on where he's at. So, I mean, you've got a $2,000 discrepancy there between those two sites. But the one that I wrote about in my DraftKings FanDuel pick article as a DraftKings specific play was Matty D starting 11th. He's 9,400 on FanDuel, which it makes him nearly unplayable. But at $7,400 on DraftKings, it makes him really enticing as a potential tournament play.
Is he in the best friends column this week for you?
He's going to find his way into some lineups. That is for sure.
Yeah, that's we always kind of joke about here of who's going to get in that best friends category for Phil in terms of the race here. But of course, as we mentioned about, we like to break these down in terms of tiers. Tiers 1, we based on the DraftKings pricing of 11,000 and 10,000 drivers, and of course so on and so on. So let's look at tier 1. So we look at tier 1. We've got 5 drivers in this one. I made sure to write down drivers on my sheet, not fighters. So I don't say a fighter, even though sometimes we know drivers can become fighters. We know that can happen. But we got 5 in this category. Denny Hamlin starting 2nd, Kevin Harvick in the 8th spot, Chase Elliott, who's on the pole, Ryan Blaney is starting 7th, and Kyle Busch starting at 15. Let me start with Kyle Busch because of where he is starting at. Does he rank a little higher than maybe some of the other ones because of potential point differential?
Yeah, Kyle, you're getting him at a basically a discount, because I mean, when you look at this track history over these last few races, he finished 2nd in the Wednesday night race, and partly was because he wrecked the guy in front of him who was leading. 26th in the first race, and that was before we ever knew that Kyle Busch needed practice in order to actually be a good driver. 3rd, 7th, and 2nd in the 3 previous Southern 500s. Kyle's got great track history here. He leads laps. He gets to the front. He's always a contender to potentially win the race. So now you've got him the cheapest in this tier. He's got place differential starting 15th. And the thing that we have been waiting for, and especially all you Kyle Busch fans out there, is if Kyle can just have some track time or some practice time, then look out, because he's gonna do well. And I mean, it's basically been that story when bad luck or he doesn't get in his own way. So what do we have here? We have 2 races worth of data that's going into those practice notes for Kyle Busch and his crew chief. So you're giving Kyle nearly 500 miles worth of information going into this race. if it's ever going to happen for Kyle this year, this should be the race, because he should have so much previous knowledge to bank with how well he's done here at Darlington in the past. It should be wheels up for Kyle. The only problem is that starting position. If you look at the lap sled data in the race sheets, typically our Dominators, they don't come from any position worse than sixth. It is tough to pass here. It is tough to get up front, and with the other playoff drivers basically all starting in front of him, especially the ones that we're projecting to lead the most laps. Yeah, Kyle can get to the front, but the real question is going to be whether he can beat Hamlin, Elliott, Truex, Harvick, beat those guys and actually get to the lead.
By the way, I appreciate Pete Rogers Jr. checking in on the chat. We always kind of, me and Pete always joke about NASCAR. How, he said he hasn't decided who to roster yet. He says, but whoever I do decide to roster, make sure you full fade those guys, because we always kind of joke with me and Pete joke about how it's a good chance if someone wrecks early, that driver is likely somewhere in one of Pete's lineups. So that's always, of course. By the way, if you have a question you can leave that right now in the YouTube chat. We will get to all of your questions throughout the show. If we don't get to your question when you ask it, we'll get it towards the end of the show. Also, you can hit up those questions over in our premium Slack channel as well. Of course, if you want to get all of our driver projections, ownership projections, everything we got NASCAR related, you got to sign up for an Awesemo Plus NASCAR weekly pass for $9.95. There's never been a better time to get in on the action, so you got to take advantage of those tools. I will tell you, that's I base my lines based on the conversation me and Phil have here. Pretty much after we get done with this show, I'm like, okay, I know how Phil thinks. Let me go into Fantasy Cruncher. Let's that's how I put my lineups together. It's a way to do it here. So you got to sign up for that weekly pass right now for $9.95. Ryan Blaney was a guy that we talked a little bit about last week. Do you like him better here than you did last week?
I do, and we always have one of these drivers every week where if you look at his track history, it should totally scare you off. And Blaney is that guy. His last 5 finishes here at Darlington: 21st, 16th, 13th, 15th, 31st. So we're talking about career best, not career best, but best finish within the last 5 races, the last 3 years, of 13th. No laps led, only averaging 3.8 fastest laps. His average running position is 19.4. So it's not like he's running into issues late in the race, and those are skewing his finishes. So he's just kind of middling the whole event, running around 20th. However, those Blaney finishes, I don't think they're representative of what we've seen from Ryan this year. In years previous, when it came to these afternoon into evening races, I was a full fade on Blaney. There was something screwy about those races that he just never did well. Well, he's kind of fixed that this year. He's doing better. We know that in this 550 horsepower package, the 12 team always has plenty of speed. And perhaps, because the consensus is going to be so high on Hamlin, Truex, Harvick, and probably Keselowski, that Blaney's going to be the odd man out. And especially when you look at him at 10,300, it's going to be so much easier to say, well, crap, give me Kyle Busch's place differential, or I'll just play the pole sitter and chase Elliott. Perhaps you can get Blaney at lower ownership as people just kind of forget about him or just choose not to play him because of what he's done here at Darlington.
Looking at our ownership projections right now, 3.2%.
Yeah, that's bananas, and that shows you just how little you have to get either to match the field or to double up on the field.
To give you an idea, at 4.5% ownership is Quinn Hoff.
No.
So I look at that because no matter what sport I'm talking about, in terms of whether, this situation, NASCAR, I'm doing an MMA show, I'm doing an NBA show, an MLB show. I'm like, okay, who are the high salary options out there that people are not taking advantage of? And
Mm-hmm.
when I see 3.2%, I'm like, okay, I got to have him in some lineups, because if he does have a great performance, he's going to be optimal at that rate, most likely.
Right. And something to throw in here is, people may not consider it a sound part of NASCAR DFS, but the tire packages that Goodyear runs, I mean, certain guys do better in them than others. And the last time that we ran this tire package was at Homestead, and that was a race that Blaney finished third in. So if you're looking for something positive upon this, because, even what Blaney did with this tire package in the two previous Darlington races, they weren't that fantastic. But if you look at Homestead, which was supposed to be a day race, but because of rain, it turned into a night race. Well, then you can look at Homestead and say, well, crap, the last night race that ran this tire package, just like the Southern 500, Blaney came home in third.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something you got to look at. Chase Elliott, I know you wrote a lot about him this week because of being at the pole. I mean, this is something, and you talk about it every time since we've been doing the show, and you said to me, it's like, hey, if you're in that pole sitter, having that clean air, you have to look at that when you're looking to roster multiple Dominators.
Yeah. The last time that we saw Chase on the pole was following his win at the Daytona Road Course, and he started on the pole at Dover, and he sailed off to the lead, but it only lasted for, I believe, 30 laps, because then the competition caution came out, and Austin Dillon decided let's go with two tires, and Austin Dillon ended up sailing off with the lead and leading 40 something laps. But the other thing for Elliott is he didn't beat Hamlin out of the pits when they basically did the same thing. Hamlin beat him out, started second, and then it was Hamlin's show from then on. So, I have some pause about Elliott as the pole sitter. Elliott's shown plenty of times that when he has the speed that we see in practice to back up a number one starting position, that he can be an outright dominator. But I mean, we're sitting in the dark right now because we don't have any practice. So does Chase have a car to back up that spot and be an outright dominator? We can assume so, but something wonky could happen. Lose the lead because of a competition caution and never get back out front.
The other two drivers to mention in this tier is Kevin Harvick and Denny Hamlin. Kevin Harvick, second highest salary on DraftKings, highest salary on FanDuel at $14,200, $10,900 on DK. Then Denny Hamlin, the most expensive on DK, $11,400, and he is $13,500, number 2 on FanDuel.
Yeah, Hamlin is the guy that I want. Like he's just been so good in the Southern 500. He loves Darlington. He's racing in the Xfinity race today because he just wants another Darlington win. This tire package, he finished 5th in the day race, finished 1st in that Wednesday night race, and then you fast forward to Homestead, and he won that race, leading the most laps. Hamlin is the layup this weekend. It's what you do after Hamlin that is kind of the tough thing to figure out. And because of how good Harvick's been, and Harvick won that Sunday day race, and he's got finishes a 3rd, 1st, 4th, 9th. He's been really consistent himself here at Darlington. But there is one question that I have with Harvick. Harvick has shown in these evening/afternoon into night races, he hasn't been nearly as strong. It's like whatever in-race setup changes that him and Childers need to make, they're not nailing them, especially to the extent that Chris Gabehart and Denny Hamlin are. So, could Harvick be a potential lap leader? Well, yeah, I mean, he's been that good. And, we've seen in plenty of these races when Harvick and Hamlin have race notes to come back to for a following race, it's either one of them that's going to be the winner. They come back and they dominate. So you've got that in Harvick's back pocket. But the thing that I do wonder about is what we've seen in these afternoon into evening races. What's happened with Harvick and his ineptitude to lead laps. I wonder if that follows him here Sunday night.
Moving on to tier number 2, drivers that are in this one. We got Joey Logano, Erik Jones, Martin Truex Jr., Ricky Stenhouse Jr., Kurt Busch, Brad Keselowski, Austin Dillon, Jimmy Johnson, Eric Almirola, and Clint Bowyer. So I just said, okay, I know I'm going over tier 2. Let me just look at my dummy just fantasy crunches. No, didn't put any input into them. Let me just see what Fantasy Cruncher brings out for me. So Erik Jones, 93% DraftKings and 87% on FanDuel, and these are crunches of 150 lineups. Ooh. So you see that obviously. Now look, obviously once you kind of start working the fantasy cruncher system, you can kind of who you like, who you don't like, that type thing. So, but I just like when I do these shows, like let me just do a dummy crunch, let me see what pops up. When you and you briefly mentioned Erik Jones a little bit earlier, is he this guy in the tier that you believe everyone's looking at? And you know what, if you're looking to be contrarian, maybe you do fade him a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, say this week in and week out, the most bankable asset in NASCAR DFS will always be place differential. And out of all of these guys starting 20th or worse that has the true capability to bring home a top 5 finish, it's Erik Jones, and he's got tons of place differential. Now, on both sides, you're paying for that place differential, but because of where he starts, he's just that much more capable of reaching that 5x or that 6x or even better than a lot of these guys. Because you look in this range, you go above Jones to Logano. He starts 13th. The only way Logano is going to beat Erik Jones is with Dominator points. And right now, I can't project any Dominator points for Erik Jones. You go to Truex. This is where I think a lot of people are going to have a tough time. They're probably going to go Chase Hamlin or Hamlin Harvick, and then it's going to be, do I side with a third Dominator like Truex, or maybe all the way down to Keselowski, who's underpriced at 8,800, or do I play Jones, who I know is safer because of that place differential, but I don't really feel like he's, he might get some fastest laps on his way to the front, but there's no way I can safely project him to actually lead laps. If you're playing cash, you are absolutely playing with fire if you don't go a 2 Dominator build plus Erik Jones. That is going to be the chalk around the industry. And even if you don't like Erik Jones, you may still have to play him in cash just to play the block. Because if Jones ends up with a top five finish and you don't play him in cash, you're done. I mean, you will be absolutely done. You're just kind of hoping that the 2 Dominators that the other people played, end up crashing or didn't end up getting any Dominator points at all. So if you're looking to play it safe, you go with Erik Jones. If you're looking for a little higher upside, then you're looking at another one of these guys as a third potential Dominator.
Of course, this is a NASCAR DFS strategy show right here on Awesemo.com. Of course, do us a huge favor. Hit that thumbs up button right here on YouTube. That does help us out a lot. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button and also that notification bell so you know a new show is live. Of course, I'll have MMA live before lock. We've got an NFL show today at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time. MMA live before lock show starts at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And then at 6 o'clock, we've got MLB live before lock. Also, we've got NBA live before lock as well. So a ton of shows today here at Awesemo.com. Of course, as I mentioned, be sure to smash that like button there. Looking at the ownership of Martin Truex Jr., for instance, we've got him as the 4th highest owned currently on DraftKings. But over on FanDuel, he's 8th.
Yeah, and I hadn't really looked at that until you brought that up. But I mean, a $3,000 discrepancy for a potential winner on the sites. That is pretty big, and you can easily get Truex in lineups under 9,500, but with Truex being north of 12,000, and what is he? He's the fourth highest priced driver on FanDuel this week. That's that's really going to probably keep people off of him.
Yeah. So that is something to pay attention to here. Joey Logano, I don't think we've mentioned him yet. Starting 13th, 9,800 on DK, 11-2 on FanDuel.
Yeah, he's a guy. I mean, like, if you are doing 150 lineups, he's a guy that you have like a handful of shares of, just in case something breaks his way. But you look at his previous Darlington finishes, and he's got a second place back in 2018, but everything else, it's a 6th, 18th, 14th, 18th. He really hasn't been that strong here. And the correlation that I used next to the Darlington races was the high banked ovals this year. So we're talking about Darlington, we're talking about Homestead, and we're talking about Dover. Even though they use different packages, I combined those 5 races together. And Joey's average finish there is 13th, three top 10s, 7.4 laps led, 7.4 fastest laps, 12.2 average laps led. So I mean, he's getting there, but in the end, his finishes aren't anything that you're really desiring. So he's not a guy that I'm going out of my way to make sure that he's in lineups.
In terms of some other ones, obviously we talked a little bit about Brad Keselowski a little bit. Austin Dillon at 12, Jimmy Johnson 22, Clint Boyer at 9. You mentioned a little while ago about really it's about being in that top 6 starting position in terms of dominators. But as you look at kind of the lower end of this tier 2, who sticks out to you with who you believe has the best shot of delivering the best score?
I like Erik because he's cheaper. He starts 10th, which is going to be a weird place for people to go after, especially with Jimmy Johnson offering 12 more positions to gain on the track for $100 more. You look at Austin, Erik, what he did in this tire package. You've got 7th and 12th at Darlington, and then if you go to Homestead, 5th. So, I mean, we're not talking about a potential winner here, but at 8,300, you really don't need that from Erik. You can probably squeeze out a 5th to 10th place finish for him and end up making value.
By the way, Ricky Stenhouse Jr., who we talked a little bit on his price on FanDuel, 36% ownership.
Ooh. I think we might find some better pivots when we get down the board. We just might find some better pivots.
Yeah, I know James asked about a value driver. We'll get to that later on in the show in terms of answering your question. Also, someone asked about best pump play. We'll get into that as well. But moving on to Tier 3, we've got 2 drivers who are starting in the top 4, that being Alex Bowman and William Byron. Byron in the 3 slot, Bowman in the 4 slot. I would have to imagine that when you're telling me, look, you got to have 3 dominators in a GPP. These got to be 2 guys you consider, right?
Bowman for sure. Bowman ran really well in both of the previous Darlington races. These cooler when the temperatures get cooler, that's when we start considering Bowman again. In fact, the last time that Bowman led a lap was dating back all the way to late May with the Charlotte doubleheader. So throughout the summer, the temperatures increased, and Bowman's nowhere to be found near the lead outside the plate races. So we give Bowman consideration. He saves you a lot of salary at just 7,900. Byron's a guy that I really don't trust. It seems like he has nowhere to go but backwards. Perhaps he can, because how hard it is to pass at Darlington, perhaps he'll just lose a couple of initial positions because of who's behind him, and then he can kind of hold on to a 10th place finish, which it makes him mildly interesting. But for the salary, I'd rather go down $400 on DraftKings and just play Matt DiBenedetto, who has that 11th starting position. So he has more room to go forward. And I can kind of safely project a top 10 finish out of him should, everything break in his favor tonight.
So I just decided, let me just pull up, let me create 3 drivers. Let me just see what kind of salary it leaves me left over with. So putting Alex Bowman in there, and I said, okay, let me put Blaney in there at 10-3 just because of what we mentioned about what we currently have for ownership. And I go, let me throw Chase Elliott in there as a pole sitter. That leaves me with an average remaining per driver of 7,000.
Yeah, and the beauty of that build is it gives you balance, and you don't have to mess around with the punt plays. Inevitably, you're probably going to find yourself with at least one, maybe 2 punts for tomorrow night's race. But I think the rule is always that if you can stay away from these lower tier guys, you try to, and that kind of build definitely keeps you out of that range.
Yeah, it's when we look at, you mentioned about Matt there at 11 spot, Tyler Reddick, who I want to say was on DraftKings. Yeah, DraftKings, 54% ownership.
I know it's not me changing these, changing the feeling of the industry about Tyler Reddick, but I mean, he's in such a good spot for DraftKings. You've got him at 7,000. He's done so well in these 3 races with this package. 13th, 7th, and then at Homestead, I believe it was a finish of 4th. These high banked ovals, they really fit the type of driving style that Reddick wants. Like if I come over here, Reddick's average finish in the 5 high banked ovals, a mile or greater, 11th. 14.2 fastest laps too. So I mean, you really can't project Reddick to lead laps, but in the process of him moving forward, he's definitely going to knock down some fastest laps. I mean, I put up the Rand Paul meme in the DraftKings and FanDuel article. I mean, it is happening. It is time to play Tyler Reddick. It's time to go 100%. Slam your fist on the desk and enjoy every bit of it.
You've been in the Tyler Reddick fan club before, so we've definitely heard you there. The other guy in this range that was getting ownership, and it was on the FanDuel side of the things, I believe. Was it FanDuel? No, it was in one of my crunches. That's what it was. Was Matt Kenseth.
Matt's gonna be a somewhat popular play this week just because of where he starts. And really, when you look at where the rest of the guys around him, they start themselves, Matt's going to be kind of the de facto play. You've got Christopher Bell at 6,900 starting 21st. Bubba Wallace starting 17th at 6,700. Then you go below Kenseth, it's Michael McDowell starting 19th. John Hunter Nemechek starting 18th, and then Ty Dillon starting 25th. So, I mean, if you find yourself in this area, you're going to pick the guy with the safest floor, and that is Matt Kenseth. If you look at his momentum, what he's done, it's nothing to write home about. But in those 2 Darlington races, 30th in the night race, but 10th in that day race. So there isn't much ceiling to Matt Kenseth at this point in the 42 team, but really where he is, he's probably the safest floor that you can get out of all of those drivers that I listed.
Dan asked about Ryan Newman in this price range. He started in a 31st spot, so obviously there's definitely his ability to get some points there in the differential rate. 7,200 on DK, 7,500 on FanDuel.
Newman's like young Matt Kenseth right now. What this 6 team is doing. It's not really fantastic. Let's see here. Yeah, 36th at Daytona, which hurt a lot. But then 24th, 19th, 19th, 13th, 28th, 21st, 28th. So I mean, you're getting okay results, but it's really not that really not that great. You look at what he did in the return to racing at Darlington, 14th and 15th. You know, Darlington's a track that he's done pretty well at over his career. The one determining factor for Newman is how far he starts back. So he starts 31st. He's got a good salary on both sides. He's a guy that I would comfortably play in cash, but in tournaments, just I can't go there.
Ty Dillon at 25, he's at 6,000 on DK, 4,500 on FanDuel.
Yeah, there you go. If you are at 5,500 or below and you need a final pick, play Ty Dillon, save the money. Don't care that you've got $1,000 left over. Play Ty Dillon instead of playing Ricky Stenhouse Jr. You know, Ty's finishes here in the last 5 races at Darlington. His worst finish is 21st. You know, he is staying on the lead lap. He may eventually lose it towards the end, but I mean, he's giving you a 18th, 19th, 20th place finish for his troubles. So, you know, if you need that in cash and you're down around 6,000, he makes a great play. And if, you know, I think Ryan Preece is going to be a whole lot more popular in cash or tournaments because he starts 34th. So perhaps if you're left with a 1v1 in tournaments, the option is, you know, playing the ownership game and going Dillon instead of Preece.
You know, someone had asked about best value play, and I guess we can also kind of tie this into best punt play as well as we look at Ty Dillon, and as we kind of work our way for the options that are under 6K. Is Ty Dillon, Ryan Preece kind of, would you label those two as your best value / best punt play of the week?
Yeah, Preece unfortunately probably is. Like, Preece is closing out the season horribly, but you know he's been on the bad end of a lot of misfortune. You look at his last 3 finishes here at Darlington. You throw out the Wednesday night race because that was a bad engine, and that could happen to anybody. But before that, finishes of 20th and 22nd. So you kind of give Preece this idea, okay, he's probably a 20th to 24th place driver. So that makes him, a good pick for cash, maybe even a good pick for tournaments if he's going to truly pick up 14 positions. The guy that I'm looking at as your Galaxy Brain tournament pivot is going down to Chris Buescher, starting 20th at 5,700. A guy that I think a lot of people are just going to say, no, if he starts way too far forward, I'm just going to bypass him. Average finish of 19th, average running position of 19th. But the thing that I like about Buescher is that he's starting far enough forward that he shouldn't be a threat to get lapped or to, you know, lose laps later on in the race. Your hope is with Buescher that he just kind of hangs on to the tail end of that lead lap and outscores the rest of these guys in this price range because of finishing position.
By the way, if you do have any questions, be sure to hit those up right here in the YouTube chat. Also on the premium Slack account as well. We will get to those before we get out of here. You know, there's obviously, you got, 7-ish drivers who are 3,000 and below the minimum salary on FanDuel. You know, for someone who's like, you know what, maybe I put one of those drivers in my lineup to be able to get some other drivers I want. Does any of them stick out to you?
Not just one. I got 3.
Oh, wow.
And this is one of those rare occasions where if you're saying I've got one lineup and I've got $3,000, which one of these guys? I'm just going to say make a deposit and add 2 more lineups because you're going to play all 3 of these guys. You're going to swap them out for each of these lineups because, you know, that it may end up in your best favor. I can make the case for Joey Gase. Starts 38th. He only has one position to lose. You look at his finishes in those 2 Darlington races back in the spring, 29th and 30th. If Gase can replicate that again, that's great. J.J. Yaley finished 28th in the day race back in the spring. Billicky ended up driving that car in the night race, and I believe Billicky brought that sucker home 27th. So if Yaley can bring in that car that Yaley's in this weekend, it's been the fastest punt punt car kind of all year. So if you're just hoping that he's the one that stays towards the front most often of all of these guys, then he's probably your bet. And heck, you can even look at Reed Sorensen. In that day race, finished 29th. Last year's Southern 500, he finished 30th. These are all guys that I think you could conceivably see them picking up 7-8 positions, maybe even more, if this becomes like a weird attrition race. So those are all guys that I can definitely make a case for, whether, absolutely punting on FanDuel, or you need a 5,500 or cheaper guy on DraftKings.
Of course, it is Labor Day weekend, which means the NFL season is right around the corner. And sign up today for an Awesemo Plus NFL monthly pass for 25% off when you use the promo code SLEEPER at checkout. This gives you access to all of Awesemo's leading player projections, ownership projections, premium content, and more for NFL DFS. This limited time offer is available through September the 9th. It'll get you a month of Awesemo Plus NFL and the Draft Kit, an $80 value for only $38. Sign up now by clicking the Awesemo Plus tab on the Awesemo.com homepage. My first draft is coming up on Monday. I got to take advantage of this Draft Kit, man. I know everything about Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I know everything about the NFC South. Sometimes don't necessarily know everything about the rest of the league. So that's where, especially that draft wingman, I think is going to come into a factor for me as I'm trying to build my lineup. Yeah, you sit there and ask me about like some Tennessee Titan player. What's his name's Adam Humphries. That's probably about the only one I'm going to tell you about.
The guy that used to play for the Bucs.
Oh man, I'll tell you what, that kid. You throw anything around him, he catches it. He just, he's just one of those. He's a slot receiver, man, and he can, I would tell you from the Bucs, Scotty Miller. I think that's Scotty Miller and Justin Watson. Those are the two guys you got to look out for, because obviously, the Bucs have got a pretty loaded offense this year.
For sure.
So, but yeah, I've got my first draft on Monday, so looking forward to that. So, by the way, if you do have a question about this NASCAR slate, leave that in Slack or on YouTube. Pete says, he goes, who are we not talking about that's going overlooked?
Woo! The easy answer is who you brought up, Ryan Blaney. That ownership, his track history, what he's capable of versus what he's done. Those are two different trajectories. We kind of talked about Brad Keselowski, but that's a guy that should definitely be in your player pool for a second or a third Dominator option. He's been really good at Darlington. He started on the pole, ended up leading the second most laps before he ended up fading to 13th. You fast forward to that Wednesday night race, he finished fourth. Go back 2 years ago, he won that Southern 500. He's done pretty well here. You look at other day into night races, he ran really well at Kansas. Let me highlight him here. 10th at Homestead. You look at both of the Charlotte races. He won the Coke 600, which was a day into night race, and then the following Charlotte race, which is a day into night race, he finished seventh. So I think Keselowski's a guy, and he's so cheap on DraftKings. It doesn't make sense why he's 8,800. That's a guy that should be in your player pool.
Here's what I'm looking at that kind of has me shaking my head a little bit. Looking at ownership on Alex Bowman and William Byron on DraftKings, the two lowest owned.
People. I'm trying to say this gracefully. One of the biggest mistakes that we make is we've got these guys that are priced down, like a Bowman, and we assume that price is reflective of the driver that they are. And quite frankly, Bowman's down in this range because that's kind of the range that he's been hanging out in. But if you remember when we first started racing back at Darlington, Bowman was nearly a $10,000 driver. He was coming off of the win at Auto Club. He was a guy that we were heavily targeting in that that first race at Darlington, pounding the desk for people to play him, and he ended up leading, I believe, 60 something laps in that race. I mean, that is such an easy ownership play right there, and a guy that you get 10% of them and he can make a difference for you.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, that ownership really, shocked me. I mean, Bubba Wallace in the same situation. I know, he's 6,700 on DK, so obviously, very affordable salary there. And Matty D, we talked about him as well. He's also got some low ownership as well. I mean, there's some drivers here in the low ownership category that I look at and say, man, if these number ownership stays kind of where it's at, man, I kind of know where my core build may come from.
Right. And, if you're not going to find pivots with the Dominators, then the next thing that you have to find pivots with are these guys that are starting a little far forward than people want to play. Like in this range, people are going to play in the Bubba Wallace range, that is. They're going to play Newman. They're going to play Reddick. They're going to play Matt Kenseth. They're going to stay away from Bubba Wallace and Michael McDowell because in their minds, they start too far forward and they don't have enough of a ceiling because they don't have access to place differential. When you totally forget that if your Newman, your Reddick, your Kenseth gets lapped, then they lose all of that place differential upside that they have, while these guys are going to outscore them simply because of finishing position.
Yeah, it's something you got to pay attention to. By the way, coming up here later today, here on Awesemo.com, we have got the NFL show starting at the NFL DFS Analyst Show, 3:30 lawfully. Going to be with Alex and Steve. Then at 4:30, myself and Pete will be on for MMA Live Before Lock. Then at 5:30, we will have NBA Live Before Lock with EMAC and Adam. And then at 6:05, MLB Live Before Lock with EMAC and Terry. So be sure to check out all those shows. Of course, be sure to smash that thumbs up button right here on YouTube. If you do have any questions that you do want to ask, be sure to fire those in here before we get out of here on this edition of the DFS Strategy Show. Cash games in terms of Dominators. So are you saying it's two Dominators?
Yeah, I think go on the safe side with two, and then you're going to have to add in Erik Jones because of ownership and because of place differential upside. So now what people do with those two Dominators, I think that Hamlin's going to be the hands down choice for most people. But I think it's going to be a real toss-up between Harvick, Elliott, maybe Kyle Busch because of that place differential, or Martin Truex Jr. I think those are going to be kind of the four main guys that people pair with Hamlin and Erik Jones. And then what you do with the final three positions, I mean, even if you go Hamlin, Harvick, Jones, you're not going to necessarily force yourself into a punt play, but even if you do, if you need to play Gase, Yaley, or Sorensen, do it. I mean, there are so many laps, and these guys start so far back that they give you access to those drivers that you're wanting to get in there. And what you need from these guys to make value, they are fully capable of doing this weekend.
McDowell starting in a 19th position. What's your take on him?
McDowell's kind of in that same boat that Bubba is. You just hope that he hangs around, that he stays on the lead lap. He might move forward a couple of positions by the end of the event, but he's just got a guy that you're hoping stays there, doesn't get lapped. In the two previous Darlington races, 17th and 23rd. So yeah, he's kind of maxed out starting wise where he should finish, but I think he's capable of hanging on to that lead lap and not losing it throughout the tenure of the night.
I think you briefly touched on Cole Custer a little earlier. He's in the 14th spot, 76 on DK, 7,200 on FanDuel.
Cole is he's a bit of an odd duck. He's a guy that you could easily consider for tournaments because of his starting position and can he hold that position. But you look at what he's done at Darlington, those previous 2 races, 31st and 22nd. So I mean, not that fantastic. You look at what he's done in the 5 high banked oval races, average finish of 19th. So, it kind of feels like Cole could fall back and maybe be a threat to get lapped. But yeah, I got to think that at that salary, a lot of other people are considering that same thing, and that you're probably going to get him at a really low number. What do we have Custer versus Matty D pegged at on DraftKings ownership wise?
Let's see here. Cole Custer and Matty D. Cole, we've got it 6%. Matty D is under 1. No, I mean, look. These ownership numbers are going to change a lot. I mean, it's Saturday. It's early Saturday afternoon, so these are going to change a lot. So, but that's where they kind of stand right now.
If 6 times the field is going to play Cole Custer over Matty D, either I'm going to have a horrible day tomorrow, or I'm going to have a fantastic Sunday night when I finally wake up.
We haven't talked much about SuperDraft at all. I know you got an article up at Awesemo.com that people can check out. You got a ton of great articles that people can check out there. In terms of, let's first talk about the champion slot. Who is I mean, obviously you could take the top guys. Harvick 1.5 times, Hamlin 1.6 times, Keselowski 1.65 times. I mean, what's your kind of take in the champions role of who we should go with?
It's not to the degree that we were last week with Brendan Gaughan, and everybody that faded Brendan Gaughan as your champion pick. I hope you had a lovely evening. Erik Jones, he starts so forward back. He's got such a high potential to move forward. I mean, if he isn't the champion, it's because he's ran into Erik Jones type luck, or somebody else has wrecked him out in the process. Starting 30th, my model is projecting him to finish 10th. So with that 2.25x champion multiplier, I've got him sitting at 201.825 SuperDraft points. The only guy that I can see via place differential that can get that close is Tyler Reddick, and Reddick's going to have to push for a 5th place finish in order to get to that point. Something I brought up in that article is Dominators should definitely be on your periphery this week because of the amount of laps led, but because of Erik Jones and how far back he starts, these Dominators truly need to dominate this race in order to reach that 200-point threshold. Originally, I gave Hamlin 200 laps led of a 367, and that got him within earshot. I've lowered that back down to 150 laps led, which only gives Hamlin 179 points as a champion. But I mean, if Hamlin, Keselowski, Chase, Truex, Harvick, Blaney, any of these guys are going to approach what Jones is probably going to do, you're going to need to see 200, 220 plus laps led out of these guys.
In terms of just the flex position on SuperDraft, I mean, obviously we can hit on the top guys, but who are some of the value guys you see on SuperDraft?
If Newman does what he's capable of doing, which is about a 15th place finish, then Newman is going to end up around 120 points as a flex play, and that's definitely going to be one of the better values on the board. Looking here at the flex points, and of course these guys we're not worried about laps led points because they're not gonna be in that range. One of the lower owned options that I think is gonna reach that area of being a top flex play is Aric Almirola, because I think that he's going to end up hanging on to the top 10, and that's going to net him about 90 points as a flex play. Kind of the same thing with Chris Buescher. All Buescher needs to do to approach the 90 points, which is where I'm kind of looking at for my flex plays on Sunday. Buescher just needs to finish 19th. He just needs to move forward one position relative to where he starts, and he's going to end up in that range. The chalk plays are going to be Ryan Preece. They're going to be Ty Dillon. depending on how you feel about Ricky, he's either a guy that you smash because he's got a 1.65 multiplier as a flex play, or a guy that you just you fade. Because I mean, that's probably the guy that's either going to make or break this slate tomorrow. And I mean, I'm so low on Ricky right now that I can't give you an unbiased opinion about him. But you know, in my mind's eye, in my model, it's saying fade Ricky. But that multiplier, Ricky doesn't really need that much on SuperDraft in order to hit that 90-point threshold.
A question we got from James says, why is Jones so popular? I mean, obviously, I guess the easy answer to that question is just where he's starting at.
Yeah, it's, you know, starting 30th. You look at his previous finishes here at Darlington. He's raced here since 2017, and his worst finish is 8th. I mean, that is pretty good.
Yeah, that's right when I saw the question came in, I pretty much knew what the answer was going to be on that situation. Obviously, this race is tomorrow, 6:15 p.m. Eastern time. We'll leave on this. What are you looking at over the next 24 hours? So, I mean, obviously, we gotta pay attention, make sure that someone doesn't magically end up in the back of the field. That's obviously the one thing I'm always looking forward to. But what should people be looking out for?
Hopefully before the race, we'll get some driver interviews and see how they're feeling going into this race. If you guys don't already do, some of you guys probably watch the NBC pre-race show and see what Jeff Burton and Dale Earnhardt and Steve Letarte are saying. Change up your process this week and instead go over to NASCAR and pull up. I believe it'll be MRN that's got the duties this week of broadcasting the race. They will be going pit by pit and interviewing these drivers, getting their opinions of how they feel. And it's not just what NBC is going to do, where they're going to get the top tier drivers. They will practically talk to everybody. So you will hear how these guys feel about their cars, feel about their chances going into the night. And you know, we might hear somebody who is really disappointed in their vehicle, or you might hear somebody who's just a hair-centric about what they're feeling like going into the race.
Yeah, it's something you got to pay attention to. But that is going to do it for this week's NASCAR DFS Strategy Show. Of course, we're here every Saturday to get you ready for NASCAR DFS. Of course, be sure to follow Phil on Twitter. He is at Race Sheets. As I mentioned, we got a bunch of shows here today on Awesemo.com. Also, if you, for whatever reason, you can't watch us live, this show is available on replay on YouTube, also available on our podcasting channels. All you got to do is go to Awesemo.com and you get the links to all those channels. So that is going to wrap it up for this edition of the NASCAR DFS Strategy Show right here on Awesemo.com.